And welcome to Restoring Our Roots podcast, the voice of the Decriminalize Nature Movement. This podcast is a gathering space where we explore the wisdom of entheogenic plants and fungi, the beauty of natural healing, and the importance of reconnecting with the sacred earth. Twice a month, sometimes more, sometimes less, we'll hear from visionaries, healers, and advocates who are working with entheogenic plants and fungi, exploring realms of consciousness, and returning to a balanced relationship with nature. My name is Larry Norris. I'm the co founder of Decriminalize Nature and the national organizing director. I've had the privilege of helping teams all across the U.S. Pass policy. I think we're at about 28 or 29 cities now. Hopefully, a new one coming up next week. So, pretty exciting there. Keep an eye out for more information about that. If you're in a city out there that's looking to change some policy or you're excited about what we're doing, please contact us at decriminalizenature.org. We do a monthly orientation. We'll help you out. We give you the tools you need to go ahead and pass policy, and we help support you along the way, help to build community, and help to build that sort of local educational and support infrastructure. So please reach out to us if you're interested in doing that. Also, if you are available or able to, please donate. There'll be a donate link in the bottom of the podcast here, and donate to help the movement out, to help us move forward and continue to helping people make sure they have a good relationship with plants and mushrooms. Also excited to have our behind the scenes maverick here, which Rachel doing all the good work behind the scenes. So we're on YouTube Live right now, but we'll be also putting this up on our podcast platforms in the next in about a week or so, including Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, and Spotify and others. So really excited to have Rachel here. Thank you always for being so great with this and putting together we're almost now on season 3 of our incredible podcast here, which just started off as a wonderful idea that kept growing. And now we have wonderful guests like Kat today coming in and so many others as well. So really excited about this.
Season finale,
So
actually, right?
season finale. That's right. So then the end of
Mm.
2025, right?
Yeah.
So anyone that's listening to this live, keep in mind Rachel will be watching the chat box. If you have any questions, please go ahead and answer some or ask some questions in the chat box. In the last 10 minutes, we'll discuss anything that comes up. Kat's got some really wonderful things to say, I'm sure, and we'll have some great opportunity to discuss anything that you want to discuss as well. So excited for that. Our guest today is Kat Courtney. Really excited to have you on and really be able to spend some time to actually chat with you. You know, I've seen you on so many different platforms and really just appreciated all your work you've been doing and really how you view things, your perspective on this, the ethos that you bring forward. I think that's so critical. There's so many different sort of people out there working on different sort of angles, and you know, you always seem to be true to your heart and in full integrity. So I really been appreciating that. So I'm excited to be able to come together and chat with you today. I know this Laura was going to be here as well, but Laura actually rescheduled to be coming up in April. So we'll have another great conversation then, but really excited to have you on by yourself so you can really get the nitty gritty of all the things that you think about and all the studies that you've been doing. It sounds like you've been doing this for about 22 years now, or maybe even longer than that, which is fantastic. You have Plant Medicine People is one of your organizations, and Base is another organization, which I'm excited to hear more about, an all women Ibogaine or Iboga organization that you have going there, which is great. And like I said, I've seen you do so many wonderful things on the platforms out there that you know, it's almost. I think you said that you were a fangirl earlier. I think I also a fanboy as well, just appreciating all the good work you've been doing out there. So, really, how are you doing today, Kat?
I'm doing amazing, Larry, and I totally feel like longtime listener, first time caller. Like I'm so happy to be here. Like such a fan of what you are doing and your team. Like so it's an honor to be here.
Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your background for listeners that maybe don't know kind of who you are, maybe a little about your organizations and kind of how you came into this work and what interests you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I found my way to ayahuasca to start with about 22 years ago, kind of the same way that a lot of us find our way to the medicines. I was kind of lost and sick, and I had a good life on paper, but it was pretty darn miserable. And I followed a guy to the jungle. He said, "Do you want to do this ayahuasca thing?" Which, by the way, nobody knew about back then. And I fell in love with the plant, not the guy so much. I broke up with the guy and stayed with the plant, and one of the best decisions ever. I went on a healing journey, obviously, but then a couple years in, I was like, can a white girl from Montana learn to carry this tradition? And it turns out, yeah, I was welcomed into the Shipibo Canibo tradition and studied that for about 10 years, going back and forth to Peru and Central America and traveling all over and just having wild adventures, learning to sit and hold the intensity of that medicine. And then, let's see, about 5, 6 years ago, founded Plant Medicine People, which is a platform that really my passion is about helping connect people and plant consciousness. Like, and really working on that wound that a lot of us have of being disconnected from nature and the just pervasive sort of suffering that happens as a result of that. So we do courses, we do retreats, we do integration coaching, like all of the things, including ayahuasca retreats in Costa Rica and Peru. And yeah, as you mentioned earlier this year, my partner and I launched Basse, which is an ibogaine clinic. She's been working with ibogaine for 20 years. I am in support of that. And so we have this interesting bridge between shamanic medicines, clinical medicines, and all the ways in which these medicines are supporting people in healing all the things, PTSD and addiction and you name it. So I'm really lucky that plant work is my entire life right now.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. Yeah, and I think I don't know for you, for me at least, I was came across ayahuasca around the same time, around 2000, 2001, right? And it was so, there's like something seems special about ayahuasca. Mushroom experiences really like you can dive into these deep layers of things, but ayahuasca for me was something that I had to really grok the idea of like, what does plant teacher mean? What is this? What is this other being that we're in a conversation with? What is this relational dynamic that's kind of playing out? What was that like for you as you sort of first came across it? And was that sort of an immediate realization, or did that come kind of later on the road? And like maybe speak a little bit about your early experiences as well.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things, the consciousness of that plant. And it was right out of the gate for me. In fact, the first thing she ever said to me, and I should preface this by saying I was not a plant whisperer going into sitting with ayahuasca. I couldn't even keep a house plant alive, let alone think that I was going to be in dialogue with a plant consciousness. But it happened right out of the gate. And she said, "Hey, it's nice to meet you again for the first time." And I'm like, okay. And then I heard her say, you're going to bring thousands of people to this work. And I answered back with my internal voice, like, I don't know if I'm even going to do this again, let alone be your marketing director, but like, whoa, what is this? And I was so blown away by the consciousness, the sentience, the intelligence, and that has really never stopped. That plant in particular is just mind blowing, like the cleverness, the articulate, like nature, the surprising kind of, backdoor trickster energy she can have, like the whole thing. I'm just forever indebted and a student of her wisdom. Yeah. And then of course what she's helped me to be as a human being is pretty spectacular. So yeah, I'm a big fan.
Mm-hmm. And when you, for folks that aren't really too familiar with ayahuasca out there, what, what about it is really special for you outside of the things you just mentioned? Like, for me, just as an example, it really feels like there's like a realm of consciousness that we step into and can then kind of explore in a different kind of way. What are your thoughts around these different spaces? A lot of times you hear about entity encounters. So for folks that maybe aren't too familiar with this, maybe sort of lay the groundwork a little bit for folks regarding ayahuasca, and then also some of the more unusual or non-Western ways that we can kind of see the realms of consciousness through this lens.
Well, the way I look at ayahuasca is she's primarily an expander of consciousness. Like, and I really feel like there's a dimension that is her home that is different than the 3D space that we occupy. Not that she can't meet us in this place of duality, but there's something like you're naming so otherworldly. Like I could work with her for another 20 years and still not really understand and have language for it. Every time I'm there, it's almost like childbirth. It's like, whoa, I forgot how intense, how magical, how cosmic and multidimensional. And really, what is also striking about working with ayahuasca is every time that happens, she often just kind of reflects it back as you're these things too. We're all multidimensional. We couldn't have these conscious experiences if we didn't also have that capacity. And it's kind of, it's impossible to describe, but it's such a incredible awareness that there are other dimensions, other places that are available for consciousness. Because this isn't always the easiest place to be here. I call it Earth School. Earth School is intense. Duality is no joke. And it makes my heart happy to know there's a lot of other rays of consciousness to explore. So yeah, she's an expander. That's how I see her.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I mean, just even just for me picking up on like that there is more to look at and that there is an expansion that you can kind of go into. Really, I think I studied neuroscience as an undergrad, and so the first couple times I had ayahuasca was just like mind blowing in terms of like there being more. And so what often comes into these conversations then, especially with ayahuasca, and this is some of the research I was doing as well, is it starts questioning the nature of reality. Like what is, you said earlier, Earth School and realms and dimensions. Like, is this like a major lesson we need to be thinking about as humanity right now? Like, why do you think that these plants and mushrooms are kind of coming forward right now in a way that are really helping us expand beyond kind of this mental framework that we're, sort of stuck in?
Well, that's it. You named it. We're not a happy species overall. We're getting increasingly more serious and divisive with each other. Like there's so much conflict. There's so much lack of self-love. Like, we're brilliant in terms of the level of the mind, but we're not really kind to each other overall. And as a species, we're not kind to the planet. Like there's just so much that is clearly wounded about humanity. So as that wounding has ratcheted up, it seems like the awareness and the popularity of plant medicines are too, because they're one of the paths that can really help us to heal from the inside out, that kind of the trauma, the pain, the lineage trauma that we're carrying, and also to wake us up to the fact that there's way more to consciousness than just this very serious, intense 3D space. Thank goodness.
Hmm. And so when you had your first experiences, I imagine this was the first time you had any psychedelic. Was that right to ayahuasca or?
No, I loved LSD. I loved MDMA. I loved mushrooms, but it was always recreational, right? I was never a part of something that was intentional and ceremonial before.
Hmm. And again, for the listeners, can you help to maybe describe the differences between, because recreational, I'm not against that by any means. I've been, as I say, slapped upside the head by spirit on many dance floors, but ayahuasca isn't really something that you do recreationally. Maybe some of these other materials you can, but what's a ceremonial context like for folks that aren't familiar with it, and how could you maybe relate this to, being on a dance floor? Like, what for people that maybe are only familiar with the more recreational side, what are some parallels, and then what are some unique things that you find in an ayahuasca ceremony that you won't see elsewhere?
Well, having a good time on a dance floor is sacred too. But the big thing with creating ritual or ceremony is that even by the ritualistic things that we do, we're creating a container that at least from my vantage point, I want it to feel safe to really kind of melt into and surrender into whatever experience the plants create and intentional. That's the big shift. It's like when we do something recreational, it's just like, let's have fun, and let's listen to music and bond or whatever, which is also truly sacred. But it's when we work with the power of our intentions with these medicines, we can co-create more from that place, because the plants are mirrors in many ways. They're just mirroring what we're bringing forth. If it's not intentional, it can be more chaotic.
Mhm.
And again, we can learn that way. But when we come with some vulnerability and some self-awareness of, hey, I'm really working on healing this thing, or I'm really curious to learn about this part of consciousness, it can be like accessing an oracle. That has that kind of answer that reveals what we know, but maybe we're forgetting at the time. So it just has more power, I think, to feel sacred and safe and intentional.
Mhm, mhm. And is there any like unique sort of ritual, like container building that you see that works really well for folks, that like is there like a protocol for building a good container?
Yeah, it's something I've kind of adopted over the years. It's been a bit dynamic, especially since COVID, when we're all kind of dealing with intensity of shadow work on the regular anyway. What I have found is really helpful in the ritual of safety is to first create a foundation with the people that are doing the ceremony together. So when I do retreats, we don't drink medicine the first day. We want to get together, get to know each other a bit, create safety in that way, connect with the land, be intentional and respectful about the culture and the spirits of the land that we're working with, uh, educate ourselves a bit about the medicine and the tradition that people are sitting with so that we have a foundation that, in the old days, I'd go to retreats and the first night, here's a cup of medicine and off we go. And it just like, whoa, like not to, it didn't work necessarily. It just also felt a little less intentional and stable and even safe. So I just like to, titration is my love language, is what I say a lot these days, of like one layer at a time instead of immediately go big or go home.
Right, 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 yeah. And you mentioned earlier sort of COVID, and have you seen a shift in both how people are sort of relating with the medicine and also the things that people are coming to seek post-COVID time?
I really have. I mean, the really obvious thing that I think has shifted is people are just more sensitive to the medicine as a whole. They're already kind of cracked open by life. We're all dealing with a lot. And so I don't pour nearly as heavy as I
Mm,
used to. Again, the titration has been something I've adopted because I just see people in a lot more vulnerable states. But in that sense, it's kind of like there's a deeper sense of integrity that we are hurting, we are scared, we are dealing with a lot. And I like that. And so does ayahuasca. She loves vulnerability and honesty. But I think it's required, at least with the people I sit with, just more of a gentle hand and more of meeting people where they're at and creating safety even by letting them have a say in how much medicine that they're going to drink and celebrating going slow and steady rather than, I mean, I studied Shipipo. They're kind of known for being hardcore. And
mm.
my teacher was hardcore. You drink 3 cups of medicine and you push. And I'm glad I learned that way, but that's not how I do it now. That's how life is treating a lot of us. So we don't need our healing space to feel as intense and difficult and chaotic as life can feel.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I hadn't really thought of it myself about sensitivity, and I've noticed like recently, like, wow, it doesn't seem like I need as much of whatever I'm taking to really have these breakthroughs, but I never really realized that seems to be a standard across at least the people that you're seeing, that there's a little bit more sensitivity now that's happening because of this sort of vulnerability, this rawness. We're all in this raw space right now, right? All things that we thought were going to happen didn't happen, or things that people that we thought were good people are not people, good people. They change or shift, or all the kind of things that can kind of happen. And there Betty Eisner talks about setting, but then the third one being matrix, right? And the matrix meaning the embedded social systems and cultural systems that we're in, and how that can actually influence and affect our experience. But yeah, I think that's really fascinating, and it's something for me to reflect on, just in terms of sensitivity, and also learning the titration modality a little bit as well, which sometimes I don't always remember to do when I start off on doing these things. With the Shipibo, it seems like there's there's dietas that happen. There's like the songs, the Icaros, and that type of thing. For me, even like you're talking about with sensitivity, and the sort of the powerful sort of songs. Do you ever meet Yalila Espinoza once upon a time?
No, but I know the name.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah. So I did a ceremony with her once upon a time, and I always had like when the really sort of powerful masculine Icaros were coming through, I watched myself kind of block it a little bit. Like all of a sudden, like, okay, this is maybe too intense, and I naturally will like come up against it and maybe don't get that same sort of subtle healing. And then Yalila would come in one time, and just sung so softly, and it was like watching the songs like seep through the cracks of the wall that I had put up and get into locations that like I wouldn't have ever got into if it was this really strong sort of powerful masculine like coming at you voice. It was much more subtle. What's Speak to me a little bit about this, about the power of the Icaros, about sort of the strength and the sort of the feminine and sort of the subtle and all these types of things that can happen with a song, and maybe even speak a little bit more to what Icaros are for folks that don't really have too much familiarity with that.
Icaros are my favorite part of the ayahuasca process, the ceremony aspect. And so they're songs that are typically in Shipipo, Quechua, sometimes Spanish. But they are songs that work with the language and the vibration of ayahuasca. And they're downloaded often through this working with ayahuasca or master plant diets, as you mentioned, like just basically merging with the plants. And in fact, the Shipipo that I studied with believe there's a portal where the songs come from. There's like a dimension where these songs come through. So none of us own the songs. Sometimes we're the first vessel to bring them in. But what's interesting is like what you're naming of how the medicine of the person, of what, our vibration is when it's put in combination with the song that's coming through, it drives the intensity or the vibration of the medicine. It's basically like the conductor.
Mm,
And what I love, what my teacher taught me is that what we want to do when we're singing is to actually be sung, to be deep in the medicine so that the songs are working us and not the other way around. I mean, the most powerful songs that I sing are when I'm not even really at the, consciously trying to drive it. And sometimes the songs come in a completely unexpected way. Like you're describing, like I might have a song that's fast paced and intense about purging. and
Mm,
it comes out like a lullaby because that's what the space needs is this soft and gentle energy. And the less I'm thinking about what I should sing and how I should sing it, the more powerful it becomes.
mhm,
Because then spirit can work with me as a vessel instead of have my ego drive. I always tease that the cat show is interesting. The ayahuasca show is way more interesting, which is why we typically drink the medicine when we're leading ceremonies, is so that it can be driven more by ayahuasca than, our limited minds. But the songs they're incredible because people don't speak Shipipo in the space, right? But when we sing a song about purging and the room lights up in tears and releases, it's always so magical that we feel what the meaning and the vibration is about, even if we don't know the translation.
mhm. Yeah, it's so beautiful. Yeah, I mean, the interconnection between song, music, vibration, and the healing process is so intertwined. And again, that's one of those things that, when you hear about the clinical studies and the exclusion, especially around ayahuasca, exclusion and inclusion criteria, there's too many variables. We can't do purging. We got to exclude those people. We can't put song in there because we got to exclude that. Like, that's so intertwined with everything. How do they expect to have an understanding of these medicines when you're cutting and when they're cutting out like all these different ritual elements? What are your thoughts around sort of the clinical attempts at working with ayahuasca, and do you think that's even something that's possible, or it needs? Obviously, I imagine I know your answer, but it seems like it needs to stay in the forest. But what are your thoughts around the sort of the clinical dynamic there?
It just doesn't fit. The two don't fit together because the clinical dynamic wants things that are predictable, repeatable, and ayahuasca is so unpredictable and fluid, and that's partly why she's so magical, is she's like 10 steps ahead of what our egos anticipate or have an agenda around. She says to me all the time, it's like if you think of our mind as a hammer and a hammer breaks a window, it's not the right tool to fix that window. So, because our minds are the part that are really grappling with suffering and separation, it's not the right tool to bring us back into a place of unity. And the clinical space is all mind. And approaching ayahuasca, like I know there's like pharmahuasca, which takes out the purging. I'm like, that's like trying to build an airplane that doesn't fly. It's missing the point of the magic of the medicine. And it just kind of is a symptom of why we're hurting, is our main symbol of healing in the clinical world is still very mind-based, not trusting emotions, not trusting fluidity, not trusting spirit. And so it's not really going to bring us the results of healing that we want, to just basically take the pharmaceutical model and apply it to ayahuasca.
And even like, well, we're trying to heal this condition, and not say like, whoa, that condition is embedded in all these other things, like personal and spiritual growth, like connection to the sacred, like, being, in a better relationship with community and family and friends and lovers and all that kind of thing. And so like, it's like this equals this, and then they miss all the other stuff that comes into play. And I think that's also a big challenge when you're talking about some of these different really powerful, plant medicine teachers in these sort of models of pathology. Yes, you hear stories about what ayahuasca can do that can't even be, measured in the clinical model. But yet people are coming up with these cures and healing in these different types of ways on things, that kind of boggle the Western scientist mind. So it just really speaks to this, there's so much more, right? So much more.
There's so much more. And the other thing that's different about the ayahuasca philosophy in the clinical space is ayahuasca has always been worked with in community, that it is a communal medicine, it's tribal, and most clinical spaces are one-on-one,
Mm-hmm.
and the practitioner doesn't take the medicine, they administer it and then sit and watch you like a voyeur. And that's not at all what the traditions with ayahuasca have been about. And there's something really powerful, right? When you're sitting in a circle with people all drinking this medicine, we're all on our own journey and we all got to do our own work, but it's really affirming and inspiring to know we're all in it together at the same time. And it's really hard to heal the wounding of disconnection when you're alone or with somebody that's not even in the same state of consciousness, that's just observing you. Like that wound won't get healed either in that clinical model.
Mm-hmm. And it seems like there's a one additional thing that it's never really mentioned. Of course, they can't because it's a secular model. But it's not just that you're alone in this dimension, but like there's never any protocols for how do you create a safe space, not just here, but in their spiritual realm. And you never hear about clinical folks talking about like, oh, I need to create a container that isn't just in the physical 3D realm, but also can move beyond that into these other spiritual realms where there might be beings or entities or things like that that could either help or hinder or what have you. And how do you sort of, when somebody comes across some of these big maybe otherworldly, other being type experiences, how do you help them sort of settle in with that? Do you see these as sort of archetypes, as beings, as like, also even the question around ayahuasca? We talk about ayahuasca as the plant teacher, the mother, or what have you, but also then there are other beings that are in the experiences, and so how does that sort of work within this being within the being, so to speak? How do you see all that?
Yeah, what a great question. I mean, I really see the spirit world as just an extension of the tangible world, and that we're in relationship with nature, each other, things that are tangible, things that are intangible. And when people have their first awareness of, whoa, there are energies that are conscious, it's like, yeah, just to normalize it like that, it's just like being in relationship with another human being. It's complicated. Some people come with pure intentions, some people don't. Spirit is the same. Sometimes spirit is just feels like it's just pure yummy love. Sometimes it feels like, whoa, this is loaded, this is intense, and everything in between. And I just think that's the nature of reality is that it's complex. Consciousness is multifaceted. And so there are entities or spirits that don't necessarily have a tangible form, but we can be in relationship with that the same way we are in relationship with each other, which is complicated. And it's supposed to be. And the same with nature. Nature's conscious,
Yeah.
and we can recreate that relationship that our ancestors had. I mean, that's the thing. We're not the first to discover that. We forgot it, actually. We're now remembering that all of consciousness is sentient and all of it's available to be in relationship with if we want that.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and for some people out there, because I know this comes up a lot. I hear this from folks. Like, how do I know? Is this my ego talking? Is this a message? Is this my intuition? What ways do you help people discern what the messages that are coming through? Some that maybe are like, okay, this is really actually this is just me thinking this, or maybe there's something that's really more powerful than that. What are some techniques for discernment there?
Ooh, it's one of the trickiest things about working with plant medicines and spirit. Well, first things first, I like to sort of just narrow it down to how to know it's our ego. So if there is a message that comes through that feels like it's part of a hierarchy, in other words, if you hear, here's a bit of information and you're the only one to ever know it,
Mm,
that's either a spirit messing with the ego or ego, regardless. If there's a hierarchy, if it's less than or greater than, if it's you're the only one, if there's any sort of separation, I don't trust that as being part of anything other than ego, because that's the ego's job. And when I connect with the purity of spirit, it's like I might know something that somebody else doesn't remember, but they have the same access to all the same wisdom, all the same power, all the same talents, etc., that I do, that any of us do. So if it's a message that feels like it's based in a space of equality and empowerment, yeah, I can trust that maybe that's coming from a divine force. Also, just our own somatic experience of trusting how things feel in our body, which is another thing the plants are helping us get back in tune with. Typically, if there's a message from my ego, I either feel the defensiveness in my ego and I can also feel contraction in my body, or my body itself will be the thing that says, that doesn't feel good, and just to kind of pay attention to those sorts of signs. And really, the biggest thing is if the ego is justifying, defending, insisting, if there isn't some plasticity, some allowance of, hey, maybe there could be a different way to see things, then you probably know you're dealing with an egoic message. If it's defensive, if it's this has to be true, the attachment, those are all telltale signs of ego.
mhm, mhm. And then when it comes to something like intuition or some of these other insights, I know you mentioned earlier with plant medicine people that you work a lot with integration. What types of ways do you help people sort of pull that information through and even remember it to some degree? Obviously, that's the hard part too. Do you have any sort of techniques for helping people remember things?
I think I look at it in a different lens that we remember in ways that aren't always conscious. And to
Mhm,
bring us back into a space of trusting that, we know, even scientifically, the conscious mind only holds a tiny portion of what we have access to, even on the level of our own minds. And the joke ayahuasca has is you're on a need to know what the basis with the universe, what you need to know, you know. And that if we can develop more of a trust in that, we'll actually have more access to the knowledge that we carry. The more we grasp, the more the universe is like a dangling carrot that kind of hides from us. So there's a level of trust of just kind of accepting, okay, this is what I remember right now. This is what I know is clear about the experience. Because a lot of times in integration, it's like, what just happened? It's like, okay, well, what are you feeling? What is your current experience? And then a lot of what I do in integration is the opposite of what the conscious mind wants. I want to get out of the conscious mind because that's typically where the wisdom is. So bringing in creativity, like why don't you go sing to a tree for a bit, see what happens, or do stream of consciousness writing, or just dance what you're feeling. And it's amazing what comes forth when we just kind of put it aside and stop chasing and let a different part of our awareness bring forth the wisdom. So a lot of integration is the opposite of what the mind wants. It's not about creating meaning, it's about connecting to different parts of ourselves that has the answer.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of I've gone back and forth because we have this idea integration also equals implementation, right? So integration, once you're not integrated until you've actually applied the daily, insights and you've had the behavioral change and all that kind of thing. So when I've kind of wrestled with these ideas, I often think of integration as more of a meaning making process, but it is then becomes more mental. And yet I find so much work that's can be really valuable in just doing painting or some sort of creative process where it's a nonverbal. And I like some of the other nonverbal approaches that you mentioned earlier as well, in terms of like how to sort of tap into that. I've even heard people say sometimes listening to music that was similar to what they heard in the ceremony can help bring things up that they maybe had forgotten or they hadn't really thought about. But it is such a cosmic joke that you have these great insights and then they just disappear, and they're not really meant to be, as you mentioned, not really meant to necessarily be brought forward. I was talking to somebody last night actually about this idea of symbolic latency. So it's basically like these downloads or this piece of information that we get are planted like seeds in our brain or our mind or however you want to look at consciousness, right? And we're not really supposed to see this. You can't pull the flower out of the seed, right? It's just going to be sitting there, and we water it with information. We do more integration work. We put some more water. We get some good soil in there, and then maybe it takes a year. I've had insights come through many years later unexpectedly. It just all of a sudden three or four things happen at the same time that helps remind me. It's like this big synchronicity, and then boom, that idea flourishes in a way that I wasn't ready for previously. So maybe talk about that process too. Sort of, you mentioned there's this long, sometimes a longer wait period. It's not going to happen right away, but speak to like sort of the insights that can come over time and how then to help bring that back for people because that might be more shocking for folks as it comes maybe 2 or 3 years later.
Yeah, it's a process though, all of this. Like, I love your metaphor of the seed gets planted because sometimes we feel as though something comes in and disappears, but
Mm,
does it? Or does it just get embedded somewhere that eventually will come forth, without us forcing it? I feel like the way that we water and nurture these things is just by being kind to ourselves, self-care. Like, so again, even though this might be counterintuitive, if somebody comes out of a powerful plant experience and they're like, I'm so confused and I feel like the most profound things happen, but I don't know what to do with it. I'm like, well, then the answer is being kind to yourself. What can you do to show up for yourself every day? Because that is watering whatever was planted.
mhm,
And how could love expressed to ourselves from ourselves be anything other than nourishing and to bring forth, always holding the intentions of what we want to create in our life, but not feeling like there's a time frame of urgency that we have to force it. Because I think the universe, the more we try to force something, the more it's kind of delays. Like
mm,
there's such an element of trust that the plants try to teach us. And if we use them as examples, when a seed gets planted, the plant has its process and
mhm,
seems to be really trusting of that. And
mm.
that some plants grow quickly and some take their time and everything in between. And to allow ourselves to be part of that. We are nature. And we're not supposed to just overnight become the best versions of ourselves. That would be a really boring life. We'd be like, done, Christ consciousness achieved. And then what?
Right, right. No, I mean, I really like, I mean, so many times I've been looking for insights and think, how would the natural world do this? What things would happen in nature? And again, we are nature, but also just like reflecting on that. Here's this thing I'm trying to figure out. How would nature handle the situation? And oftentimes the insights are pretty profound when you really think about it there. So yeah. We're talking a little bit about ayahuasca. I know you're also doing some work with iboga. That's a slightly different experience. Maybe for folks again that are kind of new to this, what's an iboga or ibogaine experience? Like I imagine you work more with iboga, or you said you had is an ibogaine clinic.
We
So
actually work with ibogaine
okay,
specifically,
okay,
which is an alkaloid in iboga
okay.
that our mentor, Dr. Deborah Mash, discovered like 40 some years ago. When you isolate this one molecule from iboga, which is a plant in West Africa, kind of like ayahuasca that's been used in spiritual traditions with the Bwiti tribe for centuries. But ibogaine is such an incredible molecule because when you isolate it in concentrated forms, it disrupts addiction, specifically opiate addiction, and also is, I think, from what I can see, the most powerful disruptor of trauma, the ability to close trauma loops that maybe have embedded since birth. And if you work with iboga, it's a psychospiritual medicine that is, again, similar to Aya, mushrooms, like beautiful opportunities for spiritual growth, but it doesn't have enough ibogaine to do the neurological reset that ibogaine itself can do. So the clinic that we created this year is specifically for people dealing with addiction of opiate or alcohol, severe PTSD or chronic pain. And so if people come to us and they want the psychospiritual experience, we refer them to a Bwiti priestess that we adore in the Iboga space. But for the more clinical things and oftentimes it's people that this is the last resort. They've tried everything else. They're desperate for help. And ibogaine is absolutely incredible in the neurological reset that it can do.
Yeah, that's I have a probably told this story before on the podcast, but I had a friend of mine that was one of Dr. Mash's subjects way back in St. Kitts, and he was like he had some dreams that he wasn't going to make it. He had been, using heroin for 20 some years, and he's like, I'm starting to have dreams that I'm going to die this year. So what am I going to do? I got to like figure myself out, right? And he went and called Dr. Mash, and Dr. Mash was a little bit like, you're a little toxic. I don't know if this is going to work for you, and you might not make it. And he's like, I'm not going to make it anyway. Why don't you give me a try? Give me a chance, an opportunity for this? And so he talks about this story about this window of opportunity following the experience. And Laura knows who I'm talking about here, Adrian. This window of opportunity about 5 to 7 days where that craving and that withdrawal isn't there. And so that mechanism is so odd because here we have this plant that's been used for initiatory rites of passage, for connecting with the ancestors in the sort of more traditional way. And then here it comes sort of in the Western world and is helping people with one of the bigger challenges that's happening currently in the sort of pharmaceutical slash medical clinical models that people are kind of inundated with in terms of opioids and things like that. What's that like for people that are going through this process? Are you finding that they're able to sort of move through? I know sometimes that post integration, he mentioned that there was a lot of work after. It wasn't just like, okay, I had the Ibogaine and I'm good. It gave me that window of opportunity, but then I had to reset. What's that like for your clients in terms of that reset process?
Yeah, well, we have to emphasize out of the gate and be honest that it's not a cure. There is no cure for addiction. Ibogaine is a catalyst for change and a really powerful one, but we set up expectations of like, look, it's going to help you move through post-acute withdrawal symptoms, which is the reason why people relapse. And we try to get to people to, typically 95% through, maybe little residual of those after effects, which is the miracle, right? Because that's why people relapse is going through those just brutal aftermath things. But you have to be willing to go home and change your life.
Mhm.
And, for example, if somebody comes and they're in a couple and both members of that couple are using opiates, both of them have to come for there really to be a space for success. Because if you go home and you're still relating to the same people that are doing it, you're still in the same atmosphere, you're likely to relapse. The drug isn't going to, the craving for the drug isn't going to go away just because you took Ibogaine and now you're hanging out with people. So we really set it up out of the gate that we do a couple of things. First, really the whole experience is also a somatic healing experience because most people that have been using these things are very disconnected from their bodies. Most people with trauma are very disconnected from their bodies. So we do gentle things the whole week with body work and somatic practices to help come back into a good relationship with these beautiful vessels. And then, helping people with the tools that they need in a personal way to create a new foundation to relate to their lives. And that could be getting back in touch with creativity. It could be creating a morning ritual that prioritizes their self-care. There's all kinds of ways we do it based on what the person needs, but the emphasis that you're gonna have to work for it afterwards. Yes, it's a miracle that it does the neurological reset and cuts through the withdrawals, but there's so much work that has to be done to create a new way to walk in the world. But what a gift to have a medicine that gives that opportunity, that window that you're speaking of.
Yeah, yeah, and I imagine too. We often hear that transformation is sometimes an isolating process because you go back to your friends and your community, the people you've known for the last decade that maybe you were doing opioids with or whatever, and now you can't really talk with them anymore. Now you have to sort of separate. Or so how do you help people also build community afterwards? Because it seems like the coming back to community can be so helpful, but sometimes for folks, there was no community until this new experience happened, and now they realize like, oh, okay, I have to reformulate things. How do you work with sort of the isolation aspect of this transformation process?
Trying to make it less isolating, meaning like connecting people that have gone through the process, doing, monthly integration circles via Zoom with people that maybe don't know each other initially, but have the same sort of journey of working with these medicines. I do reunions every month with people from different courses. I've done retreats and whatnot, because it's one of the biggest pain points that we hear is people have these incredible experiences, but then they go home and they don't have anybody to relate to. And then they feel like this alien, even though they've had something miraculous happen. But there's millions of us doing this work now. It isn't like when you and I discovered it, where we were the weirdos.
Okay.
It's all over the place now. So we're trying to do, it's kind of one of the passions I'm looking to do more of in the future, is to bring community together so that people can feel like they're not alone in what they're going through and processing, and they're not crazy for working with plant medicines and changing their lives because of it.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I mean, this Ibogaine clinic you're working with is unique in that I don't think there's any other all women led, run, organized by clinics out there. What kind of different styles and things are you doing there that really sort of speaks to this sort of type of leadership you have there?
Our focus is on the underlying trauma, not the addiction itself. Most of the existing clinics, and Laura was a part of one for like 17 years, and we had to start somewhere of realizing, okay, addiction's the problem. We actually think it's the trauma underneath. Because if you just treat the addiction and not the trauma, then you're likely, even if you cut the addiction to something like alcohol, you might go home and get addicted to food or, sex or whatever it might be. So the trauma is what we're focused on. And we do it in a really kind of feminine way of making it about relationship to the body. And like I said before, the titration model of like not having this go big or go home kind of perspective, because that can perpetuate trauma. And having it be that the number one priority is creating safety. And so we connect with people before they even come to the retreat, of getting to know the people that will be walking this path with them. And I do integration for each person that comes through at the end, and just kind of doing a lot of hand holding and relating. Like, Laura did this because she was a heroin addict. So this is her love letter to Ibogaine, and she's credible because she gets what people are going through. I'm a former alcoholic. And so we just like to meet people in a space of like, we're not clinicians, just we're also people who are alive because of these medicines, and we get the pain that people are navigating.
Mhm. And I think that's so refreshing right now too, because you've probably been hearing a little bit about this sort of the push towards Ibogaine and some of these sort of more masculine dominated, areas where even I read an article, and I mentioned this in our last podcast. I read an article from I think was quoted Rick Doblin and Dana Beal, and they were saying something like, "Well, this is going to make our soldiers more ready for battle." And it's going to be the Ukrainians on Ibogaine versus the Russians on meth. What's your statement or thought to something like that in terms of the conversation that was emerging or has been emerging, or sometimes this sort of weird, unusual bedfellows of military industrial complex and something as powerful as Ibogaine?
My perspective is we want to make the soldiers never have to fight again.
Exactly. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we want, is for all of us to realize we don't have to be at war with each other. We want the same things. We live on the same beautiful planet. So to weaponize a medicine like ibogaine and to have it be part of that industrial complex breaks my heart, because it's the opposite of what the plants teach. So our perspective is the opposite. We want to help heal the wounds of war and also create a world in which we can stop killing each other. That's the goal.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's something that I think so often or is kind of missed. Oh, we need to help the veterans. We need to help the veterans. We need to help the veterans. How do we help the veterans? Well, let's not make any more veterans. Let's stop the war. But of course, there's so much money in that, and so just seeing these types of like the weird spaces that are interested in this, even with like the LSD and the MK Ultra stuff, once upon a time, working with, how are we going to work with for brainwashing or, doing, soldier control, mind control, that kind of weird thing. Like, how do these don't actually mesh at all, right? And so to leave space for there to be healing to happen, and then the healing being the thing that's trying to sort of swallow it up and co-opt it, I think, unlike I thought this with cannabis too, but sometimes cannabis got swallowed up by some of the capitalist structures out there as well. I'd like to think that a lot of these sort of plant medicines will be able to sort of punch through, and not to use that word, maybe grow through, we'll say, this sort of strong issue, which is causing a lot of the trauma, at the base level, wars and genocides and all these other things that are happening out there. That's very problematic. And using these plant medicines to make us feel better about that, put a band-aid over it, isn't really going to be solving the problem at all. So I really appreciate your point of view on that. And also, I don't know if you want to say anything a little bit about plant medicine people, in terms of, I know you kind of said it's sort of this place for people to go for learning and education and integration work. But yeah, maybe speak a little bit about plant medicine people too.
Well, it's also the space in which I get to work with ayahuasca, which we do about 4 or 5 retreats a year in Costa Rica. Only in Costa Rica and Peru. I used to work in the underground. You may know I got arrested in Colorado and faced 40 years in prison and went through that whole rite of passage. So ain't no doing underground stuff anymore, which it's just sad how dangerous that's become for a lot of us, because of the legalization movement, not the decriminalization movement. And so I'm very well versed on all of that, not because I wanted to be, but because I had to walk through the fire. So plant medicine people is the place where I get to still have that relationship with ayahuasca, but working in places where it's decriminalized and or legal. And also, I'm just such a champion of people getting out of their element to do this work anyway. I mean, it's difficult to really change things when you're just going to your backyard or down the road, because you're still kind of in the element of what might need to be healed. So plant medicine people, I founded it too because I intentionally called it people, because I was calling in the tribe of like knowing that we got to do this work together. And the way that I was trained is by a plant medicine person, the old hierarchy of almost the guru syndrome. And that doesn't work for me. That feels like an old model in capitalism that is part of our wounding too. So it's a team of us that love and trust each other and love this medicine and get together for 4 or 5 times a year and do ayahuasca retreats, sometimes wachuma as well. I trained with the late, great Howard Lawler, and that's the other medicine that's near and dear to me. But in between those retreats, we do the coaching and the courses and the things to help educate and support people in the preparation and in the aftermath of working with medicines.
That's great. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so this is a question I like to ask all of our guests because obviously, this is a show from Decriminalize Nature as well. What is what two-part question? What does decriminalize nature, just decriminalize nature, what does that mean to you? And secondly, what has it been like to watch the evolution of this movement over time, and how are you getting interactions with people? Like, what is when you think of decriminalize nature, what does that kind of bring up for you?
Well, in a very simple term, it's just back to a place of being free, of like recognizing that we are nature and that nature is there to support and heal us. It's never been the enemy, and to make plants like psilocybin mushrooms the enemy it's just been so heartbreaking and wounding. And it's important, I know you feel the same, but the decriminalization, not the legalization, because legalization is regulation. It's back into the system. And the decriminalization represents bringing back power to the people, that we have the right and the choice to work with nature if we choose to support us in our spiritual journeys. That's what it means to me.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you very much. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, I know that we're getting close, Rachel. I think you have a question coming up. You want to go ahead and jump on that? Sure.
I had.
Hmm.
I do, and I would even say it's the favorite across the board for all the plants. It's what I tell people to at least start with, and that is tell me who you are. Tell me about your experience as a consciousness, because we so often treat it like we're sitting on Santa Claus's lap. I want this and this and this and this and this and this. And that's great because they can help us co-create anything. But to first, like any relationship, say, what is it like to be you? Honestly. Yeah, exactly. And some of the most like profound things I've learned, even about myself, has started with that curiosity about what it's like from the lens of the plant that I'm connecting with. And it also deepens the intimacy and the trust because, of course, I'm showing like respect for the fact that they have a consciousness, that it's not just about me and what I want. I think sometimes we get a little bit like narcissistic in how we navigate this space. And that's a beautiful way to start is like, just tell me about you.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Rachel. Yeah, and maybe just to follow up on that because it's something that we hear oftentimes, and I've gotten stuck in the sort of um the situation on this too is where people talk a lot about intentions, but maybe intentions are kind of what you're speaking about. It's too directive of an ask, and then next thing you know, the intention is like, oh, you want to do this thing? No, no, you got to go this way to figure out the answer to that question. What are your thoughts in terms of intentions in ayahuasca space? How do we do it in a humble way, where we're able to be open to it while also be able to sort of direct it a little bit in terms of what we're seeking.
Oh, it's kind of the master class that we learn over time of working with these plants. It's a great question. I'll use a quote that I've heard from ayahuasca. She says that in our culture, it's not so much that we have an attention deficit disorder, we have an intention
Mm,
deficit disorder, not just working with plant medicines, with life in general. We live in a pretty passive way because we haven't really, most of us, carried over the ritual of our ancestors of living intentionally. And so for me, living intentionally is more about vulnerability and presence, integrity of, okay, what am I really feeling and working with right now? If the universe were a genie standing before me, what's the thing that I really need the most? It could be healing, it could be insights, it could be knowing something about consciousness, plants, etc. But it has to come from a vulnerable place. It can't just be this mental place of, I want more abundance, or I want to know my soul's purpose, because that isn't intentional, right? You can't feel that deeply. When people do the plant medicine work with us, I love it when they come and they're so emotional, they don't even have words for their intentions. I'm like, that's way more powerful than having some slick like sentence to describe it, is that it's deeply felt. And that's the language the plants speak anyway. It's not about being crafty and witty. It's about being vulnerable. And that's where we can co-create anything because it's from depth, not just from thought.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I had a good friend of mine who um, learned the lesson a few times and like would craft this like sort of paragraph of intention. And then, first of all, like, okay, well, there's a paragraph, so now we're going to go in all these directions. And she felt she was pulled all over the place. And then, second of all, oftentimes she'd forget not only her name, but the intention, who she was, that she was even a human being. So, how do you even work with that kind of material? So, I think, that having a really specific intention that comes from the heart, and maybe even it doesn't have words on it, it's just a feeling that you know. I think that's a great way to go into those spaces, because then you're sort of again in communion with this thing that we're trying to figure it out together versus it being like too directional there. So yeah, I really like those ideas. Thank you. Yeah, so if anyone wants to find you, reach out to you, connect either with Plant Medicine People or Base or anything else, what's the best way to get a hold of you? Or do you have any websites? I know you do social media.
Yeah, well, plantmedicinepeople.com and on IG, and then it's Basse, which is Basse, ibegain.com, and we're Basse Clinic on IG, and YouTube and all the places. Yeah. And if people want to reach out and connect with me personally, I am always happy to answer questions, to help people find the next step on their path. I do all the interviews with our retreats personally, just to make sure people are aligned. So yeah, anybody wants to connect, I'm here.
Great. Well, thank you for such a wonderful conversation today, Kat. I really been appreciating it, and I'm sure we'll have more opportunities to chat in the future. Really, really happy to have you here, and to get sort of the in-depth, sort of deep level experiences of what you've been doing, and kind of hearing the insights from both of you. And it feels like almost the plants are talking through you as well in this kind of conversation. So, thank you very much. For folks out there, this will show if you weren't able to watch it live, we will be putting this out in 1 week on the different podcast channels, Spotify, Apple, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So keep that in mind. This is our last show of the year. I don't know if this means technically season 3 is coming up soon, but thank you, Kat, for being the last show of 2025, and really excited. Hopefully everyone had a great 2025, and hopefully the 2026 will be fantastic as well. I hope you have the best of luck and wishes, and all the good things for your 2026, and for Basse as it moves forward as well, and and you as well, Rachel. But Thank you all, everyone, for listening in today. And our next show will be, let me check this out real quick. I think it's in January. January 11th will be our next show, and that's going to be with Mackenzie Darling, who's working on some leadership work out there. I'm spacing on the name of the she just has a call to arms, but no, call to something podcast that just came out. Did some really incredible work. So that'll be on January 11th at 10 a.m. Pacific. If you are out there and ready to listen to our live show. Otherwise, look forward to more. We have episodes going all the way out till April. Kat's partner, Laura, will be coming on April 26th, so you can come visit us then. But we have pretty good booking up until then, so I'm really excited for that. And for everybody else out there, keep an eye on what we're doing. Check out our website. Check out this podcast as well, and donate if you can. Donate to Plant Medicine People as well if you have an opportunity to do that. And everyone here, have a good rest of the year. For everyone out there, until next time, tune in, stay rooted, and let's grow together. Have a great Sunday, everybody. Bye bye now.